And we're live. So first things first, I'm really excited to get into today's conversation because this is a topic of interest for me, and it has been for quite a long time. I've been in the military and warfare and just strategical lane of thinking for quite a while since I've been in sales, since I've been in business. I've pursued a lot of books in that direction, whether you want to go all the way back to Sun Tzu's Art of War, or one of my other favorite books, actually, The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, who was a Japanese warrior, or you want to look at modern books and everywhere else. And I see a lot of similarities, a lot of comparisons between the business world and the military and warfare world. So today's episode is exciting me. Before I got on here as well, I was just thinking about all the different places I want to take this conversation. Without further ado, Matt, welcome to today's podcast, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, Pouya, thank you for the invite. And again, it's good seeing you, good talking to you again. And I really look forward to today's conversation. So
Likewise. And, before I get into all my questions and everything that I want to talk about, why don't you kick us off by telling everybody who you are, your background, and what you currently do today?
Okay, great. So my name's Matt Wilson. I currently live in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. Let's see, spent 26 plus years in the U.S. Army. All of it was within the Special Operations community, 75th Ranger Regiment, Special Forces, Delta Force as a entry specialist, and then retired out of SOC, Special Operations Command. Went straight into contracting after that. So January 2015 is when I started my company, Special Operations Contingent Group. And that was based off of my whole military experience. So when I started, it was like I had a whole menu of things I wanted to do. It's like everything I learned, everything I wanted to teach. And as the years went on, I kind of gradually, shaved it down to, some niche skill sets and everything else. But it's a great company. We definitely work with a lot of different capacities, everything from the military, both foreign, domestic, law enforcement, again, foreign, domestic. We work with a lot of schools, getting into the safety, security assessments and all that. And also giving back to, the communities and everything else. We run a lot of women's safety classes, preteen classes, speaking at the high schools, just because, again, giving back, again, our kids are, future. So if I can help mentor or coach or anything else, we're all about that. So that's pretty much, in a nutshell, what we're, what the company is. But, we're definitely going to dive more into, that and some of the experiences and everything else. But that's pretty much where we're at right now, So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I want to ask you a follow-up question about the origin story, because that always fascinates me. And I just want to know what even got you into the military, into the Army, into wanting to pursue that line of work where you're quite literally putting yourself on the line, putting your life on the line. What was that always an intrigue for you since childhood? Is that something that developed later on?
No, it was one of those things that happened like spur of the moment. So my dad was, he served 21 years in the Army Reserves, retired command sergeant major. So I remember I was 10 years old. We were in New Jersey in our basement. My dad's getting ready to go to another, drill and all that. And he had all these ammo cans there. And I didn't know what they were. So I went down there. Of course, I'm, following him around. I'm like, what's that? What's that? And he's like, oh, that's an ammo can. Okay. Then I started asking him, what about this, your soldiers? What are the best soldiers out there? And he says, well, that would be, a Ranger. I'm like, it was like the Holy Grail went off as soon as he said that. I was like, what is this, Ranger you talk about? And so he told me, the best he could about what an airborne Ranger is and all that. And that just stuck in my head. And it was one of those things that that was a turning point for me that drove me to want to, pursue that from the age of 10 until I joined at 17. And so, it was just, again, I did, before there was, the internet, before there was Google and everything else, it was go to the library, school library, public library, whatever else, sign out of the books I could about, the Ranger history and read up everything on it. And that's where I got all my all the background, all, how they trained, everything. And that's what drove me into, going into the service and going into, specifically the Rangers and all.
That's
So
awesome.
that was my turning point right there. So I know it doesn't happen for most people or most kids at that age, but it was one of those things that just made sense. So
So you had that strong influence at the age of 10, which is right around the time you're very much, moldable. Your brain is receiving all this information and you're figuring out what you're really passionate about and things you want to dabble in. So you had that strong influence. And then by 17, you're already enlisted and getting that journey started, which is fairly
yes.
young as well.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we moved around. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey and then lived there until I was 10. Went to New Hampshire and was there until I was 14 and then moved to Ohio. And it was, again, it was just every time it's just moving around. So moving around or going somewhere new wasn't anything new for me. It wasn't really scary or anything else. So I wanted to, like most kids, they wanted to join it or just get away from, home and get as far away as they could. So I lived in Ohio. So when I was recruited, I went straight out to Washington State. Well, of course, Fort Benning, Georgia first, basic infantry, airborne, Ranger Indoctrination program, RIP. It's now RASP. And then went straight out to Washington State to Fort Lewis, Washington to with a second Ranger Battalion. And that's where, that's where I cut my teeth on everything. And I loved it. I mean, it was scary because, I mean, you got these guys that just, these just, hardened Rangers that are just, just drilling you every day on tactics, on your weapons, on, physical fitness, everything. So, I mean, it was in all matters of thinking. It was in, one of the easiest jobs to have because basically you had three things you really had to focus on. You had to know your tactics, you had to know your weapon, and you had to be physically fit. I mean, so to me, that was awesome. That was perfect trifecta for anything. And, I excelled at all that, went to, a lot of different schools, got a lot of schools under my belt from, combat diver to, jump master at a very young age, young rank. I was an E4 when we went, which is usually unheard of. Usually it's, like a sergeant, staff sergeant, NCO or something like that. I went straight after, Ranger school. So it was, like I said, it was a lot of confidence building, a lot of, eyes wide open, just like keep your eyes open, keep your mouth shut, and just listen to everything that's coming in. That was the biggest learning point for me. And to get into the leadership, which I learned at a young age, in there was I had some really, really good leaders, but I also had some really young, immature leaders. And what I did was I picked what was the best attributes out of all those leaders I had and what were the worst ones. And what I did was I kept the best attributes and remembered not to be like the bad style, the bad, leadership. And I always try to keep that in check, keep that in mind, always learning, always growing, always observing other people and taking that in like a sponge. So yeah, I got tuned up and smoked quite a bit as a young Ranger. So instead of, there was times I was not the smart Ranger, I was a strong Ranger. So I was doing a lot of push-ups and everything else. So yeah, I learned very quickly. I think I learned quickly. So yeah.
In hindsight, it's all for the best, right? The more push-ups, the stronger you got and the better you are today. So it's all good. As you're saying this, I feel like if we were in person, you would see the sparkle in my eye because I'm so excited about everything we're discussing here. And, it's something that I honestly am somewhat jealous of or envious of at the very least, because I always wanted to go to the military, at least for the first couple of years and basic training and everything else. A lot of countries have mandatory military for young men as they grow up. So, obviously over here, we don't have that. So I was never really forced to go. And I just went a different path in terms of sales and business and everything else. But it was one of my regrets. I wanted to, when I was younger, 17, 18, just the same age you got enrolled. I almost wish I had gone that path just to have built all that discipline earlier and got that training and that structure and that experience. And I think some of the just life skills and also, I guess you could say, military skills the fitness aspect of it, everything else, the shooting and tactical aspect of it. I feel like it's just such an experience that I missed out on, that I'm almost, again, envious listening to this. But I want to dig into this a bit, because I was going to ask you about when you first got started, and, you're 17, 18 as a young kid going into this really scary, in a way, environment that is, maybe not so new to you because your family had been in that, world and you've had prior exposure, but it is new in the sense that now it's your turn to step up to the plate and really prove yourself and see what you're made of. When you're going into that environment as a young kid just getting started, are you more nervous? Are you more excited? Do you remember the feelings that you had in those first few weeks or months?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, so everything you just said was all the feelings I had going on at the same time. I mean, I was excited that I was going to, the Ranger Battalion that I picked. You hear all the war stories going on about, different companies where you're going and all that. So I was like, okay, so going to the battalion, I'm getting there, super excited, super scared, because I'm like, here I am, I'm at the bottom of the heap. I mean, that's it. I am, I was E2 Wilson. You have E1, which is lower than me. So I was, so that was it. So, it was a lot of sleepless nights, because like I said, you never know what's going to be happening. But when you did, when you did sleep, it was like you were passed out because you were exhausted. But I mean, it was one of those things that both mentally and physically challenged you every day, sometimes to the point of like, exhaustion, but it's what made you that much better. And it made you really hone in your skills and become better at your job. And that job was, everything from doing airfield seizures to patrolling in the woods to, just everything from road marching to, taking care of your gear. They had everything set up for you, for success, and it was on you to be successful or fail. So it was completely, that's what I loved about it, was like, they showed you how to do things. They taught you how to do things. They walked you through it, like crawl, walk, run. And then it was up to you to whether to embrace that or not. So it came natural to me. And that's what I love about it. It was just, I picked up on it and just really thrived in that environment. If you can go into it, great. If you can't, there's always other different events out there. I mean, there's different military style events. There's these training camps. There's different events and all that. Shoot, if I ever make it in your, neck of the woods, I'd love to work with you and do some training with you. So, I mean, throwing that out.
100%. I'm taking you up on that. Absolutely. That's for sure. We'll be connected, obviously, as we are now. And anytime you're out here, I would love to get together and do some cool stuff. We'll shoot it all and, maybe release some content with that as well. That'd be awesome. And if I'm there, in your neck of the woods, I'm going to hit you up as well and see how I can connect with you there. So that's for sure.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So I want to talk about the role of discipline because, you were just talking about how, if you don't go the military route, you can always pursue these other events and find other ways to get involved, and learn those skills. What I believe in is imposing discipline on yourself and on your own life. And I feel like in personal life, that goes a long way. And I know for sure in sales and in business, that goes a long way, especially in today's world where most people are lacking that level of discipline. If you can just impose discipline on yourself and make that a conscious practice until it's pretty much second nature, I think you would have a huge advantage in the business world. So I want to know what you learned or your thoughts around discipline, imposing discipline, maybe to walk us through some of that structure that you had in the military from, morning to evening and what that's done for you now and how you're applying that as an entrepreneur today.
Okay. I think it started at a young age with me with discipline and structure because my dad. Of course, back in the, growing up and everything, both parents worked. My dad was gone 3 weeks out of the month, home for a week, had to do everything he had to do, the honey-do list, and then he's gone. So I had to step up and take those, take that role on. What started out was, I think it was self-discipline, which again came from my dad because I was the firstborn. So it was very strict, growing up and everything else, which I don't mind. I have no problem with that because I think kids thrive on a regiment, thrive on discipline, thrive on, having that structure. I really do, because when they don't have that structure, that's when kids really, really get in trouble. And that's when things happen, and just, it's, so for me, structure started at a very young age, which played out, getting into physical fitness, having that, doing that workout all the, every day, whatever it was back then. I think whatever muscle fitness workout was going on at the time, which every kid followed back in the day. And then, a good work ethic was instilled in me too, from not only my dad, but my mom also, and my grandfather. He was a huge influence on me. He was a World War II vet, Stormy Beach of Normandy. Spent 4 years over there. So I was the only one that he ever told me the stories about. First, when I started hearing about this, I thought it was joking. Then I started digging into it, researching it and everything else. As a young kid, I'm like, this guy was legit. So, just taking everything from those, those people, the resources, the ones I love, helped shape me into who I was, and point me in the right direction, give me goals, give me direction. And that built my discipline. And so when I was getting ready for, when I knew I was, for sure going in, here's my date. I was 6 months out. I already had I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning, going running before school. In Ohio at 6 months out, it was already like 3 feet of snow. It's frigid. So I'm wearing my boots, my dad's, fatigues, and I'm out there running. And, by the time second, third, class came around, I'm already exhausted. I'm beat. But then I had work I had to do. So again, it's sticking to a plan. And I always say, you fail to plan to fail. And so it's one of those things that it's like, have a plan that you're doing. So that's what I've always done. I've always built a plan, whether it's for, for my workouts, whether it's for actual work, or whether it's for, my itinerary for training, or travel. There's always a plan. You got to have a plan in place. And so that, I think all those outside, I guess forces, whatever else, directs you to having that regimen. You have to have that, because if you don't, you're going to be all over the place. It's like, I know nowadays a lot of people get real lazy because they're on their phone all the time. So the work production takes a nosedive. Well, for me, I turn that sucker off. It's like, there's certain times I turn it on, I check it and everything else. And the other times I turn it off and set it aside, or I'll put it in another room altogether. So you got to discipline yourself in all those, varied facets to be successful. Because if you don't have that, then, you're just going to be on that spinning wheel, and you're not going to go anywhere. So to get to the military was one of those that, they got you up at 5:45 every morning, 6:30, PT formation. Then, as soon as, everybody was accounted for, you're hitting the ground running. And then from there, you're usually back by 7:30, 8 o'clock, you're ready to go. And then you started your day, and you had a calendar of events, what you were doing for that day, for the week, for the month, for the year. And so you knew what was happening. So you could plan everything out accordingly and be prepared for it. And I think that was the most simplest way I ever saw of running, a platoon or a business. Have that plan, have everything out, spelled out, so everybody can see what is happening right there in front of them. So that way you're not getting, 50 questions every day. What are we doing? So that's where I think my discipline came from, was the Rangers. They were very regimented in what they did, and they were very good at doing that and getting the most out of everybody. So
yeah, got it.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, of course, it definitely did.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. And I'm letting you go on and explain all this because I'm personally fascinated. So I'm just, going at my own curiosities here. But as you're talking, you're also drawing all these parallels to business, and I love that. I love the fact that you're making all the connections here, because one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on here is not just because I'm personally really interested in everything military wise, and all the discipline and tactics and leadership and strategies and everything that comes with that world, but because I knew there are so many parallels to business, to having a structure in your life. I mean, you just talked about having a plan, sticking to the plan. Those are two completely different things, although connected, which I want to ask you a follow-up question on. You talked about having structure, having a packed calendar, following that calendar, how to run a team, a platoon, a business, whatever you want to call it. It's the same principles that are directly transferable to the business world. And I think that's already been proven out just in this short bit of the conversation that we've had. So that's awesome. Now, you talked about having a plan and sticking to the plan. One thing that I see is a huge sticking point for a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs that we work with, is sticking to the plan, right? Getting a plan is one thing, getting excited about your plan is one thing, telling yourself as of tomorrow, I'm doing XYZ is one thing. But we both know most people tend to have a hard time remaining consistent. They tend to procrastinate. They tend to have these ups and downs. It's very hard for most people to stick to a plan. Now, I want to know what you've learned, whether from all of your military experience, all of your leadership experience, or even in your business experience, about sticking to a plan, and what advice you'd give, the average person, the average business owner.
Okay, so that was a very, very good question. Excellent question, actually. So in the past probably 2 years, I've started up several new ideas, several new concepts, for whether it's for a new course for the military, or a new course for starting something. Like I wanted to go into, for example, the training of maritime personnel to go on vessels. It's STCW, and basically it's a 5-day course that gets you trained up and everything else. And I literally ran that down to the ground for about 13 months, and kept getting the runaround, and it just stayed on the entire time. And then finally it came to fruition, where I actually sat down with a Coast Guard, officer, and just, finally had a sit down, and he gave me the what for, and basically said, you don't meet the requirements. But the thing about it was, we had a plan. We knew exactly what we wanted to do. So I knew what that end state was going to look like. So you got to have that you have the idea. And then once you develop that idea, and you can picture it in your head, you got to look at the entire thing. What does it look like? What is it going to, present? What is it going to draw, people to, and everything else? So you have to have this thing, just fine-tuned. Once you have that idea and everything else, then you verse plan everything. It's like you start breaking it down to the start point. And then that gives you all your milestones, your checkpoints. You have your checks and balances. You have, everything in there that you lay out. And it for me, that's how I do a lot of my planning. And that also goes back to, I did a lot of work with the UK soft guys, and in a certain branch I was working with, we had what we called modular planning. So basically, and I got this idea, and I love this idea. It was very similar to what we did, but it was broken down even into simpler terms, where you would have a mission. Let's just say, any type of mission. Like you're going to do, you got to take down a house, for example, or something. So it's like you plan that perfect mission from the time you receive the mission to the time you are pulling off the objective. And what you do is you lay out every step of the way until you get to the point where you're, being exfilled or pulled off the target, and you're back at home base. And you go by step on this whole thing. And then you look at each step, and each step is one of those major points. And in that major point, you can start developing what processes you need to do at that point. And that breaks down basically, your stepping stones for getting to that end state. And so I take that and I carry it over to businesses, whether it was the, STCW, 13 months I tried it and everything else, and we didn't go anywhere. So I had to, shelf. No big deal. Same time I was working on that, I was also working on a class for, it was a program. It was a 18-month program for the soft community for what we call breaching, like getting through doors, walls, windows, whatever else. And so I was running both programs same time. And, it was no short order. It basically, it took me 6 months to develop the military program. It took me, 13 months to work, the STCW program. And again, it's, I'm working both at the same time. And so you really have to, again, know what you want, know what that thing looks like, reverse plan it, and then a plan accordingly to your day. It's like, which one do you need to focus on? Which one needs priority at that point? Because you may get to a point where at this project, it's like, okay, it's taking care of itself right now. There's still more to do, but it's at that point where, there's really not much I can do. I'm waiting on someone, waiting on something else, whatever. So I can put that and hold it in a limbo or whatever else. And it's basically taking care of itself. And I can direct all my attention to the next project or the same project that may be running in tandem. So you got to be able to balance that out. And, and balancing is, I hate that word, that term, a balanced
We definitely
lifestyle.
have that in common.
There really isn't. I've never found a balanced lifestyle whatsoever because it's usually work trumps everything else. And then whatever time you have left, you dedicate to that family member, and whatever else that you can do. But, if you have a good significant other, good spouse, good, like me, my wife, Carol, she's behind me 100%. She goes that when that door's closed or I'm working and all that, I mean, she's brought me lunch, dinner, here's a happy hour, here's everything else, bringing straight to the desk because she knows I'm burning the midnight oil. But, again, I support her in everything she does too. But you have to have that foundation in order for you to be successful in everything else you're doing. So and again, I know there's a lot of little, break-offs from the question you asked, because that all comes around, builds it. You got to have a good foundation. You got to have a good plan. You got to have a good work ethic. And that all comes down to, discipline. So all that plays into effect in what you're doing and how you're balancing, your lifestyle, your work ethic, your work lifestyle. So.
Mm-hmm. And having that support system as well that you just talked about, I definitely agree with that. I have a very similar support system as well, and we both support each other in our pursuits. And I can't tell you how important that is in my life, in my business career, even when I was in sales, when I was younger, in all these different industries, going through ups and downs, challenges, making big career decisions, jumping from one opportunity to another, and considering opportunities, turning down some huge opportunities. In all those crossroads, you could say, in my life, having that support system in her there for me just made a huge difference. I mean, I saw a lot of my friends or colleagues or partners in business who did not have that support system, and I saw how much less accountability they had in their lives. I saw how much less seriously they took some of their work and some of their goals and targets and whatnot. But for me, I almost didn't have that luxury to not take my goals seriously, to not take my future seriously, because I had that person who was strong backing for me, who I also did not want to disappoint, right?
Yeah.
And before I go into my next question, and you said a lot of just valuable gems that I want to touch back on. It's something important here, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I read a quote recently. I came across this in an article or a book or something one of these last couple of days. I just can't recall right now. That talked about having an accountability system in place could be a really strong piece of your success if you find somebody who you deeply do not want to disappoint and you make yourself accountable to that person. Would you agree with that statement? Or, from your own experiences, having that person who you deeply do not want to disappoint, how important has that been to your journey, to your success?
Oh, it's been huge. It's been huge. So not only, my wife, Carol, but also my two kids, Hagen and Olivia. So, I mean, that's the other thing too, is because now, and I've always said this, you have to be selfish, not like this is my sandcastle. We can't play with it. No, it's, you got to be selfish, as in take care of yourself first. Because if you can't take care of yourself first, how are you going to take care of everybody else? So that's where it all comes back around to having that good, strong foundation, having that work ethic, having that discipline and everything else. Because if you, and you will have to prioritize work over family. Some people may, throw up in arms and disagree. That's fine. But in my experiences and everything else, whether it was military, which, my kids paid a huge price. I mean, I think I missed like 5 Christmases in a row. I mean,
Wow.
So, I mean, having that discipline, being somewhere, doing a job, and knowing your family is somewhere else, but safe, you have to have that discipline. You have to have that work ethic. You have to have everything else, but you also have to have that strong foundation. And the biggest thing is, I didn't want to let them down. I still don't. It's one of those things, like, I will always be there. It's like, I tell my kids, I tell my wife, I tell my friends, I'm like, if you ever need me, whether to call up and just say, Matt, shut up, I need a vent. Hey, great, I'm here. Or, hey, I need, I need some advice. What do you need? So I try to always make myself available to my friends and family and everything else, and be there for them. And so, yeah, it's holding yourself accountable to doing, the right thing, having that work ethic and everything else that brings you to where you're at. I think it really, it's part of your character. I really do. I think it builds that character for you. And again, the way I look at it is, like, you could have 30 years of experience and everything else. It takes, 30 seconds of something that you do wrong, say wrong, whatever else, that'll ruin everything. And I never want to do that with my kids, my family, or my job or anything else. So I'm always very transparent, very upfront, and everything else. So what you see is what you get. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Anything else, I'm too long in the tooth to blow smoke up your butt. I'm not going to do it. So
I love that. And I think that's why we connected right from the get-go, because I'm very similar. And, at the very least, I'm looking to always build that in my character and sharpen that aspect of my character. So it's still a work in progress, of course, as anything else. But, I definitely love seeing that in you and everybody else as well, who I can see that common trait in. One thing that you said that really stood out to me just now was not, discipline in the sense of, the raw, get up early, work out, exercise, be hard type of discipline, but emotional discipline. Because to be away from your family for 5 Christmases in a row, to miss all these events, I'm sure you've missed birthdays, everything else. And I've heard that from other people who I follow, and I've read their books and whatnot, who are in the military, special forces, Navy SEALs, whatever else. And I look up to them in different aspects of their character and what they do, and I try to cultivate that in myself. I've heard the common threads of missing a lot of family events and making that real sacrifice. And what stands out to me is the emotional discipline, to control your emotions, to be apart, to stay grounded and level-headed and focus on the task at hand, focus on your job, your responsibilities, everything that needs to get done, and understanding that this is a sacrifice that needs to be made. And I think, again, there's a huge gap in the world today, in the business world today as well, when it comes to emotional discipline. So I just wanted to acknowledge that in you as well. Going back to a couple of things that you were saying earlier, one thing that you laid out was a step-by-step plan on how to stick to the plan. And I love that you said that. I had to take notes on it because I found it to be so valuable. So essentially what you were saying is you have a clear mission first, right? From that clear mission, you lay out every single step. So underneath the mission is every single step. And then with each step, you lay out the process and the step-by-step that goes into completing that step. And that leads to the goal being accomplished. So you have the overall mission, you have laying out every single step, and then for each step, you build out a process, essentially. You build out the actual tactics that go into that. And I think that's very much applicable to business. We do that all the time with goals that we have, with targets that we have. Let's say you have a revenue metric that you want to hit in a month, a new project you're launching, a new product or service you're launching. You lay out the mission and the goal. You start with the end in mind. Then you look at all the steps that go into that. So what would need to be accomplished for us to get to where we want to get to by XYZ date? So having very clear timelines, clear dates, clear targets, clear numbers, right? And then once you have the what needs to be done, then it's okay. Step 1, How do we build out a process for step one? And how do we complete that? Check. Step two, how do we do that? And then continue moving on that process. So I love that you laid it out so clear cut, because it's directly what needs to be done in business as well.
Well, I agree with you on that. And the other thing too is definitely stick to the plan, because a lot of people will, something will pop up and they're like, ooh, squirrel or shiny ball, and they'll go in either direction. So, once you have a plan, don't just plan hop and go all over the place. Stick with what you have. Maybe boring, maybe uneventful, whatever else, but you're laying the foundation and building that as you go along. So, definitely stick to the plan with that, because you start diverting too much, then everything gets watered down and you actually lose, that target focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no sense in the plan if you're not sticking to the plan. So definitely a good point to raise there. I want to ask you about leadership now. At what point in your career in the military did you step into a leadership role where now, whether it's one person or multiple people are responding to you and you're also responsible for them? What was that point in your career?
That was very young. So when I went to the Rangers, got there, December of '88, soon went to, well, you have to go to Ranger school, pre-Ranger Ranger school before you could get any kind of movement, as in like up the rank system, any kind of schools or whatever else. So you have to go to Ranger school first, get that tab, come back. As soon as I went to Ranger school, came back, I was automatically promoted to, E4, which to us, that's specialist. That means, usually, you're not an NCO, you're not a private, but you're right in the middle. So it's like a junior leadership position. So I immediately came back and became a gunner. You have a 3-man gun team in the platoon and everything else. So I immediately took over as a gunner. Here I am. I'm 19 years old. I'm in charge of, 2 other guys. And as soon as I got back, my platoon sergeant's like, you're going to, the guy, senior NCO in the platoon's like, you're going to we're going to send you to a HUA school. I'm like thinking HALA school, sniper. He's like, we're going to send you a jump master. I'm like, oh, dear God. I was like, all right. So jump master is one of those, it's one of the guys, you're the guy who's throwing people out of the airplane. You're doing everything from, running pre-jump to getting in the airplane set up to throwing people out and, everything. It's quite a chore. It's a task. So here I am. I'm 19 years old. Just got back. I just got thrown into a gunner position, senior gunner position, and now I'm going to jump master, which means I've got to pass this thing, because if not, they're going to look at me like, why did we waste our time? So here I am, young E4, 19 years old. I've got all these other senior guys who are there looking at me like, you're not supposed to be here. But I passed. Came back, and the really first major leadership role I had was we were going to Texas. We were doing an airfield seizure both day and night. We had a C-141, which holds a lot of people, real long plane, everything else. And I had an old Grenadier Raider who, Grenadier Raider is the guy who, the 1st Marine Battalion, 2nd Marine Battalion that jumped into Grenada back in the 80s. Okay. And so, he was, so since then, we really haven't had anything since Panama, during that time. So he walked me through the whole process. And as a young 19-year-old, I'm in charge of this whole bird, this whole aircraft. And I got to throw people out. I've got to, meet, all the points, all the checks, all the balances, everything else. So that was a very, it was a very turning point for me, because I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, my senior year, I had to give this report in biology about the human heart. I turned red. I was sweating. I was stammering. I mean, shaking, everything else, just in front of my classmates who I've known for several years. And we're, very permissive environment, very friendly and everything else. And, fast forward like 2 years, here I am, we're doing this night, jump onto an airfield, and I'm throwing these people out of there. So, I mean, and I was confident in what I was doing, a little nervous, because I'm like, don't screw this up. You get one chance. And so, sure. Again, there was a huge turn in that, going from, that high school kid to being a young Ranger. and having that, that leadership capability and ability, because it was instilled in me at a young age. Because to give you an example, whenever we'd go out to the woods, go patrol and everything else, we'd go as a squad, so about 9 guys. And what they would do is we'd meet on a Monday, go out there for about 3-4 days, and come back and then go in, clean up gear, and, have a 4-day weekend. And what they would do is they'd rotate you into positions. So I went from being an ammo bearer, which is like the bottom of the barrel person you could be. So, it's like, Wilson, you're now going to be a rifleman. You're now going to be a team leader. You're now going to be a senior team leader. You're going to be a squad leader. So over those 4 days, which was over a course of 6 months, you're learning how to become a leader in varied positions. But you learn a lot about yourself, a lot about people, how to motivate people, how to get people to do something they don't want to do, how to, clearly and concisely give your mission statement, so that way they understand what you're doing. So at a very young age, like I said, they did it right. I'm glad I started where I was at, because they taught me everything from the ground up. And I still use all those disciplines and trades and skills and everything else that I learned as a young private, in the Ranger Battalion. So there was a lot of grooming of leadership to get to that point. So yeah, at a very young age, at 19, is where I think that leadership really kicked in for position for me. And then after that, it was nonstop. It just kept going. So.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. I love the parallel you shared between standing in front of your class and doing a presentation and just being completely nervous, and then 2 years later throwing people out of an airplane and feeling confident about that. I think that in itself goes to demonstrate the importance of training and learning skills and discipline and structure and everything else to prepare you for things that you might consider will be crazy, and actually flourishing in those times. I remember I got into leadership positions and managing a small office of salespeople when I was 22. So you got into that 3 years younger than I did, and I know how young that is, and it's difficult to rise up to that level of responsibility. But I think that's exactly what's necessary, and I think you would agree with that. It's responsibility that allows you to really step up and accomplish things that you maybe didn't even believe you could accomplish. I think it's responsibility that allows you to really grow and expand your horizons. What are your thoughts on responsibility levels and taking on more responsibility, whether it's in personal life, business, in the Army?
Well, good question. So responsibility. Now, as an individual, you're accountable for everything you do and say and don't do. So it's definitely, you need to be the one that, whether you're in charge of yourself or in charge of a team, if that team fails to do something, well, ultimately, if you're the one in charge, you're the one who's fully responsible for that. Now, of course, somebody may have screwed up or whatever else, but your name's on the line there. So, I mean, you have to stand up and say, hey, look, take full responsibility of that action. And then turn around, pull him to the side or her to the side and give them professional development, give them some counseling, some mentoring, some coaching and everything else. So that way they don't make that same mistake twice. And then also, because it does you no good pointing fingers and say you're to blame and everything else. Well, there's a lot of factors that go into that. So if you want to lead from the front, you want to take full responsibility, you can delegate, you can delegate authority, you can delegate some other things, but you can't delegate responsibility because you're overall responsible for what does and doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question on that. Or...
No, you did. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it because I think it's such an important piece. So, if any young salespeople are listening to this who want to get into management or leadership roles, if, young business owners who are new in the business world are listening to this and they want to hire out and build their, teams and scale that out, anybody who's in a leadership position or wanting to get into a leadership position, from all of your experiences, what would you say are some of the key traits for being a good leader, and maybe some of the things you would avoid that you've seen, in not so great leaders? Are there some key traits or some key takeaways in terms of leadership?
Yes. One of the big things is two things. You have logic and you have emotion. You can't have both. You have to separate that. If you're going to be in a position of, doesn't matter what position you're in, you should think logically, not emotionally. Because if you think emotionally, you're going to be rash. You're going to make that decision right then and there based on how you feel. You need to think of it and look at it logically, because if you can then go ahead and develop, see what the problem is, break out, what caused that problem, how can we fix this problem by developing courses of action. And once you develop those courses of action, you can then dissect that and then, fix it. But you can't do that when you're emotional. When you're, you can have passion, but it's passion's completely different, because that's what drives you to do everything else. Emotion is going to drive you to, think with your mouth, think with your heart, not think with your brain. So I definitely would, become more logical in your thinking and your doing on coming up through the ranks. The other thing too is if you're wanting to get into a leadership position, keep your mouth shut, open your eyes, and listen to what's going on. I had a very good, my very first Special Forces team leader, Dave Leonhardt, he was awesome. We just had, matter of fact, we just had a Special Forces reunion in San Antonio, met the whole team. We haven't seen each other for decades. And we just kicked off. It was, like we just saw each other yesterday. And Dave brought it up. So he was my team sergeant. I was a E7, sergeant first class. He was a master sergeant. And I was a weapons guy, 18 Bravo. So I did weapons tactics. And so when I got in there, first thing I'm doing is like, okay, let me see your standard operating procedures, for everything. I looked at it. It was a hodgepodge, just everything was photocopied stuff in here. And I was like, okay, so everybody's supposed to know what the SOPs are. So I'd go around, ask everyone different ones. And they're like, I don't know. Where's the saying in the book? I'm like, okay, that's got to go. So I went straight to my team sergeant and I said, hey, Dave, I said, I'm going to do nothing but observe and listen. And in 3 months' time, I'm going to come back and I'm going to have things that we need to fix and we need to work on. He's like, sure, whatever. 3 months later, knocked on his door, said, hey, here's our SOP handbook. This is what we need to know. And this is what we need to do. And what he did was he crossed off the calendar for the next week, and everything after lunch was just, closed door or we're out in the woods doing exactly what that operating procedure handbook said. And so, a lot of leaders, I won't say a lot, there's some leaders that would be like, hey, this is my show, you're not doing that. Dave was like, hey, this is excellent. You're bringing the team together. You're bringing the, operating procedures to the forefront. Everybody understands them. All our gears, set pretty much the same. Our loadout, for our gear and quick reaction stuff is all set up the way it's supposed to be. Where we're going to be on the dive team, on our bud line, everything else is laid out there. So that way nobody's guessing about what we're doing, because when you have to guess at what's going on or stop and try to figure out, that decreases your time to have things, moving forward. So you don't want to have those pauses. There's time for tactical pauses. There isn't time to scratch your head, guess, and try to figure out and make it up as you go along. When you're doing that, you're in the wrong spot. You need to stop and reevaluate what you're doing.
100% makes sense. And it seems to me like you were always, because you got into leadership at such a young age, you were always very structured and organized, and were able to bring that level of organization to your team, to your platoon, whatever you want to call it. I don't know the exact terminology, but let's just say team. Going and getting those SOPs organized and bringing it back to your leader. And you're right to assume most leaders would not allow that. Most leaders would not want somebody on the team to sort of take that leadership role, because it almost diminishes them, or at least in their perspective. Whereas a good leader would want you to step up and, take on the leadership roles. And ideally, a good leader would want to replace themselves so that they can create more leaders and that they can step up to the next level of their growth, right?
No, I agree with you 100% on that. I mean, that's the whole thing. You're grooming the next leaders to come up because you're not always going to be in that leadership position. You want to hope that your guys, when you leave, next guy that steps up is going to, be able to fill that position, without skipping a beat. And if he can't, then you failed as a leader to get him trained up to do that. And honestly, I did that with my kids too. So I mean, and way I trained the soldiers, trained everybody else I worked with, the way I was trained. I imparted that on my kids too, because I looked at them as a young age. I'm like, okay, first of all, I want them to be, empowered. I want them to be confident. I want them to be competent. I want them to, when they graduate high school, it shouldn't be scratching their head like, what am I going to do? They should have a plan. They should be, they should have everything ready to go. Plus, they should also have some skill sets that, will get them, through life that other kids may not. And so that's what I definitely did with the kids. And for my daughter, way I trained her is what I based my women's safety class off. So after 19 years of developing her, training her, and everything else, and imparting whatever knowledge, that went right into my women's safety class. It was a no-brainer. I'm like, okay, what did I train Olivia on? Well, blam, this is it. What did I train Hagen on? It's all this. So it's, I was not the normal dad. I taught them how to use, weapons, armed, unarmed, how to defend themselves. And it wasn't like I want you to go out there and be a bully. It's I want you to be able to defend yourself because we live in a scary world. We really do. And I want them to be able to be switched on. I want them to have situational awareness. And I want them to be able to defend themselves and look at a situation and decide, can I walk straight ahead, keep going? Do I have to walk around? Or do I need to call someone or walk away? Because if you just blindly go into something, then, bad things could happen. And we don't want that. We want to make sure that you are eyes wide open, taking in the situation and making the informed decisions to, save yourself, to save other people. So
you just mentioned, we live in a scary world, and I want to expand on that because that idea really intrigues me. In the business world, I'm always hyper aware, and I'm thinking, worst case scenarios. I'm thinking about different contingency plans if need be in my own business and any ventures that I take on. And I'm very much comfortable with the fact that the world is not a perfect place. It's not a fairy tale story. There's all kinds of good and bad and evil and everything else. So I see a lot of that. And I feel like a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, especially over the last few years with all the events, all the Black Swan events that we had happening left and right, were blindsided. A lot of people lost their businesses, lost their livelihoods, everything else. So I think that's a bit of a lack of understanding of how the world truly operates and all the different factors that are at play and things that are in our control and things that are outside of our control and how to be prepared for all these things. So I'm glad you brought this up. I want to ask you, in your military career and over the years and becoming the man that you are today, how did your perspective on the world and all these different things shift over time? Were your eyes more opened in your military career? And I know you traveled as well. You did deployments overseas. How did your perspective change? In what ways?
One, I think it started real early. Again, goes back to, I think I was more naive as a teenager growing up because, again, everybody lives in, that la la land. Even though I was, still, I think because of reading about the Rangers and understanding, I was a little bit more aware. It wasn't until I got to, the military that I became very hyper aware of what's going on around me. We had gangs up in Washington State that would mistake us because, we're walking around with little high and tights, shaved heads, little patch of hair on top. And so, so when you have all the gangs and we look like some of the gangs out there, guys are getting jumped. So you got to be hyper aware of that stuff. So it started at a young age, like, man, we're getting it from everywhere. So, it really made me aware of the dangers that are out there. The thing you brought up with what you're saying, where businesses, kind of lost and everything else, during the past, during the scaredemic and everything else. One of the things I use, and I use this throughout my business, I use it when I'm teaching planning to, military, law enforcement, and everything else, and even my women's safety class, I use what we call PACE plan. It's your primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. So what you do is you look at a scenario, or you look at something right there, and you develop, what's my primary, what's my first action going to be? What is my primary action? If that fails, what's my backup? What's my alternate? If that fails, what am I going to fall back on? That's my contingency. And if that all goes to hell in a handbasket, what is my emergency response to that area right there? And that could be active shooter, that could be an intruder, that could be it could be anything. It could be a bar fight. It could be you're at a restaurant, you have some crazy coming in, slinging food everywhere and else on that. What do you do? So that's why, again, it's like, if you've never been somewhere before, new restaurant, new mall, new something else, do me a favor, Google it, look at it, and then do a little research on it. And then from there, develop your plan. Go to the kiosk, look at the kiosk, see where it says you are here. And then like, okay, here's all my emergency exits. Here's my other places that I can take stairwells and go over here. So always go into a situation with a plan. Always have a plan. So that's the way I am. Even when I go food shopping, same thing. Because again, with the way things are happening right now, you never know what's going to happen and where it's going to come from. So always be, I'm always trying to be prepared for it. Now I'm not, like super, focused on like, oh my God, what's going to happen. I'm just, I think because of all my training, I'm always thinking that way, always looking at it. Like, for example, it's funny. My wife is like, I don't know how you do this. We walk into a restaurant, and before I walk up to the host, I'll stop about 3-4 feet away. I'll stop and I'm just like, I'm looking. I'm like, I look from right to left to right. And then I'll go up to her and she's, I'm like, I'm sorry, I was looking for something. I wasn't. What I was looking for, when I scan from right to left, I'm looking at all my, ingress egress routes. And then when I'm scanning from left to right, I'm looking for, identifying threats, friendlies, and also where do I want to sit? And it's just a quick scan. I'm like, okay. And then if she wants to sit me by somewhere, I'm like, no, ma'am, I'd rather sit over here. And she's like, well, I mean, we're going to sit here. I'm like, no, customer's always right. I was like, I plan on sitting here. Thank you. She's like, okay. I mean, what is she going to do? So I don't mean to be an ass, but I mean, it's like there's certain places I plan on. I want to have my back against the wall so I can see everything that's going on. I want to be able to see, who's coming, who's going. I may have to keep an eye on someone, or there may be a loud, noisy table that's a distraction. I don't want to sit next to it. So all this you take into, real quick, snapshot and then go. And my wife's like, I don't know how you do that, and she's with me on a lot of the women's safety classes and everything else too. And she, again, I think because I have all those decades of training that it's just ingrained, where she's still playing, catch up. But she's very good at it. I mean, I'm glad she's on my side because she's got quick hands and she's a great shot. So, yeah. But
it's awesome.
Yeah.
For anybody listening, do not mess with Matt's wife.
Yeah. Yeah. Scary woman. So, yeah. But no, but definitely having a PACE plan, whether for work or for, going out and about, anything, whether you're going on a road trip, have a PACE plan. If something happens, do I have a network of people that I can call on? Or do I know where I'm at and where I can, go to a gas station, I go wherever else, where am I located? So just having situational awareness is the biggest thing. And I think also understanding your industry, getting back to business, it's like, what do you do if something happens? Then can I shift emphasis on that and go in this direction? So for like my business, we I work with military and law enforcement. I work with corporations, schools, universities. I work with athletes. I work with, military prep. So, it's diverse, but at the same time, it's I can go in any direction, with either one of those topics, those subjects and everything else. So when I first started doing the whole vulnerability assessments for, corporate and residential, high-end residential and all that, it was right after Covenant, the shooting over in Nashville, that I was like, okay, we do vulnerability assessments for corporations and high-end residentials. I want to do this for schools. And so for the past 6 months, that's all we've been doing is we've been building it. We've been getting in there. We've been doing everything, showing schools, hey, this is what you need. This is where you're falling short. So everything from their, auditing or reviewing their emergency action plan to developing and executing their exterior and interior assessments, covering. So it's finding that, if you see something that pops up, can your business fit into that model? So I think that's where constantly staying ahead of that, because for me, it's not like I want to be here. I don't want to be where everything's at right now. I want to be where it's going. That's what I want to do. I want to look at where is everything going to be from a year from now. Not like I need to be right here, right now. Of course I do. But I mean, that's your short term. You got to have your, short, mid, and long-term goals. It's like, what is my 25-meter target right now? Well, it's developing, finalizing this product right here. What's my 100-meter, goal right now? Well, that's, getting ready for this school speech to work, to get in front of the parents and everything else. What's my long-term or 300-meter goal? Well, that's a year from now. This is what I want to be doing. So, again, it's having that plan, again, laying out that whole plan and finding out, those milestones, those checkpoints that you have to have. So.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you said, first of all, that I just love is the whole concept of being completely aware of your surroundings, going into a restaurant, wanting to sit with your back against the wall and observing the scenes, observing entrances, exits, everything else. So I found out more recently, probably over the last year or so, and I think I shared this with you on our first meeting as well, that my grandfather was in the military for, I believe, 35 years. He was a career military man. He was training all the young recruits. Yeah, he was a shooting instructor. He had multiple distinctions and accolades. I found out later. I mean, growing up, I never knew any of this. And my dad as well was in the military. He got wounded there. So, there was a lot of stories that he shared with me as well later on in life. And, I met my dad for the first time when I was 10 years old. So there was a lot of, early childhood things that I didn't pick up on, stories and things of that nature. But the point and the reason that I say this is one thing that I learned from my dad is exactly what you said. He's extremely particular. Anytime we go out anywhere to eat or, restaurants or whatnot, and I learned this from childhood to this day, where he would not ever sit in anywhere where his back was to the crowd or he's overly exposed, or, he would ask all of us to move or, shift our chairs around so that he would be in a position where he can see everything and scan the entire area and whatnot. And I picked up that habit. So, anytime we go out to restaurants or things of that nature, with my now fiance, and if you ask her, she'll tell you the exact same thing. She knows now where if we go somewhere and we're seated in a specific location, she'll tell me, I know you want this seat, right? I'll say, yeah, for sure. So now I have that same habit that I've picked up where I always want to see my surroundings. I want my back against the wall. I want to know where the entrances and exits are. So I do the exact same thing. I'm going to learn from your trick, though. When I walk into the restaurant, I'm going to pause and I'm going to scan and look around and just say, I was looking for a friend. So I'm definitely going to pick up that trick and use it moving forward. Good. But when you were saying that, it was just so funny because that's something that I picked up from my dad as well, who also, I guess, got that from the military, and just that sense of being hyper aware and protective and whatnot that comes from that world. So it was such an interesting story. And I love that. I just related to that on such a deep level. Now, on the practical side of things, I really like the PACE acronym. So essentially you have, if I'm understanding correctly, primary plan, you have the alternate plan, you have the contingency, and then you have the emergency. And you want that line of planning, that sequential order of planning for every aspect of your life, whether it's personal life, whether it's, for your business, like we talked about. And I really like that. I like that you've simplified that and put it into this acronym. I've always known from just, again, reading military books, from following some of the guys in the military space who are more public guys. And they always talk about, one is too close to none, right? Or having one plan is like having, no plans, because if there's no contingency, then you're screwed. So I love that ideology, and I've taken that and applied it to business as well. So I love that you shared that. But I think this is a perfect time and a segue to go into some of the work that you're doing, because you talked about how you're applying that same line of planning in all the work that you do, whether it's protecting schools and putting plans in place for things like active shooters and all the unfortunate events that happen in today's world that we need to be prepared for, or it's the work that you've done overseas or other projects that you take on. So walk us through some of the work that you're doing nowadays and where really your focus is. And like you said, you like to be where things are going, not where things are currently. So where do you see things are headed, and how are you positioning yourself for that?
Okay. Well, I think, so let's take, for example, right now, working with the schools. One, like I said, Covenant hit real close to home on that with me, just because now it's in our backyard, and it's that's too close to home. Even though my kids, like I said, they're grown, they're one's in college, one's already in the workforce. A lot of my friends do have young kids. They're in school and everything else, and I know a lot of teachers, and so it did affect me. Within a week, I already formulated a plan. I knew what it was going to look like and everything else, and started developing all these, all the protocols, all the classes, all the assessments, questionnaires, everything, and just laid it all out. And it, like I said, we've been working on this for 6 months now, and we're already, working with some schools and getting in there. The biggest thing I see that I see lacking right now is communication. From what I've been seeing, a lot of incidences we've been having around is lack of communication, not only from like the staff, like the administrators, the directors, to the teachers, or from the director to the parents, or even to law enforcement. And so our biggest thing that we're working on right now is bridging that gap, trying to make it seamless for those entities. So that way, if parents are informed, teachers are informed, law enforcement's informed, now there's less of that stress, less of that, people just, losing their minds because they don't know what's going on. So we're definitely, we've been working with several schools on that right now. And being successful with a lot of stuff we're doing, because again, we're bringing our expertise from years of military. I've got other guys that were used to be in the Marine Corps, and another guy that was also in JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. So we're bringing all that experience to the teachers, and our biggest thing is understanding and learning the educational talk, their educational speak, because military sometimes doesn't carry over into the educational side. So it's definitely having those personal one-on-ones, those intimate conversations of like, how can we help you? What do you need? And this is what we have, and breaking it down a little bit more from there. Like, for example, if I was going to look at a school, like school admin on down, I'm like, okay, so we would develop like a JOC, Joint Operations Center, which involves your admin, your superintendents or directors, which then everybody else falls within that, under that umbrella, and everybody's working together. They don't see it that way. They see it more as in like like law enforcement setting up a command center, coming in, moving. And a lot of this, again, it's got to be seamless as much as possible. And so that's what we're doing with our military expertise, is coming in and saying, look, we have relevant, proven, combat proven experience that we've been doing this. We've been hitting targets. We've been, working in and out of embassies, which, they're very highly protected. How are they doing it right? And what can we do to, carry that over to schools? So if we can, one, make sure our diplomats are secured, why can't we make sure our teachers and schools and students are secure? So that's what we're doing. We're restructuring, trying to working with the schools, with the teachers, with everybody else, to make sure that, we bring that expertise and instill that into our school system. And we've been very successful with that. Some of the other things too that we're working on are safety classes that we have. We have the women's safety classes that, again, I made mention before. It's all based off of what I taught my kids, taught my daughter especially. But it's one of those things that I think is needed. Because one, it's a different world from when we grew up. From what we have now. There's all these electronics, there's cyberbullying, there's, hackers, there's all sorts of crap that goes around. It's like, how do we become situationally aware of our surroundings, and focus all that on. And so we bring that, to, preteens, we bring it to, young ladies, we bring it to old and new. We work on that. So that's another thing we're really focused on right now. But our big thing is definitely the schools. That's, that I think we need to get that underway because, one, I think when you start looking at schools not knowing where to get their money, it's like, or where to get the help or where to get wherever else, that's where we come into play and we help, redirect them or guide them along the way on how to get the proper help, the proper, assessments, the proper, cameras, access control points, everything. So it's all about them. It's making sure, that they're safe, so we've got skin in the game. We've been there. We've been on the, on the violent side where, we had to, react to it. We don't want our students and teachers to do that. So let's take what we know, our experience, real world experience, and place into the schools to make them that much safer.
I was just going to say, it's always a great thing where the work that you do on your business is also something that is helping the community, helping society, keeping people safe, giving back in the way that your work does. So I would imagine it's a really good feeling to be building your business, doing the work that you do, all the projects you guys are involved in, you and your team, but also knowing that it's for a very important cause. It's for a good cause. And the classes, the safety classes and trainings you guys are also operating. I wasn't aware of that till you mentioned it on today's podcast. And that's another awesome thing, which actually makes me want to ask you a question that I didn't ask you throughout this entire conversation. Just out of curiosity, did you have any martial arts background yourself, or did you take any martial arts while you were in the Army?
We did. It was a mixed bag of martial arts. So in the early or late 80s, early 90s, we had the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which was around the Seattle, SeaTac area and everything else, which we could go and roll with those guys, learn from them. There was some other techniques and fighting styles that came in. A lot of it was, I think, when the MMA came on, mixed martial arts came on board, I think that was one that I think was, for me, well receptive because, it taught you your stand up, taught you your ground, and then taking, going from unarmed to learning, an armed, style, like knife fighting, stick fighting. I mean, anything could be a knife, like a pair of scissors. Anything could be a stick, whether it's a ruler or it's a wine bottle or whatever else. Anything could be used as a club or stick. And it's, how do you use that? What's the proper stance? How do you strike with it? It's not, you're just out there wailing, there's, it's how to use that properly. And so I definitely, threw myself into a lot of the mixed martial arts, learning, a lot of the stick and knife fighting and combining that. And so I also teach that within the women's safety class. Like we'll learn the first situational awareness, location, travel security, all that. And then the other half is all about how to fight, how to stand, how to properly, it's like you're fighting fundamentals. Like you have shooting fundamentals, which you got to stand, hold the weapon, everything else, breathing. Well, you also have fighting fundamentals, which, you need to build. And so we take them through that, and we take them through, like pressure points, soft tissue grabs, everything. Then we get into, like throwing, your punches, your jabs, your elbows, and then also getting into utilizing, makeshift weapons, like, using a knife, using a stick. And then we get into restraint defeat, because I think that's big also. I mean, what happens? Somebody gets, rolls you up, wraps you up, throws you in a trunk or whatever else. It's like if they tape you up, how do you get out of tape? How do you get out of zip ties? What are the different ways of getting out of that? So that's where we have a very thorough women's safety class. And it takes anywhere from, I'd say 6 to 8 hours, for a class. We can minimize it, make it shorter, but, overall length, I'd say 8 hours is a perfect time for learning all those skills. And you walk away pretty confident and competent in your abilities, because, like, I'll throw a red man suit on and we'll have people that's never ever punched before. And I'm like, hit me. They're like, eh. I'm like, I'll just come over with my big old hand, smack them on top of the head. I'm like, and they get fired up. I'm like, hit me. And then all of a sudden I was like, how's that feel? They're like, that feels amazing. I'm like, of course it does. You're getting back down to your basic instincts of, like, how to defend yourself, and so everybody should know how to do that. So that's what I really like about that class, because it's very instructional. It's one of those classes, like, I'll stop my PowerPoint at all time. I'll stop it. I'm like, I can stop anytime you want. You have a question, you want to say something, and you got a story, say it right then and there, because it pertains to what we're talking about, because I can stop and pick up anytime I want. And so it's very interactive, and I want that. I want them to feel comfortable. I want them to throw their stories out, because I learned from that. Because the day I get up on stage or on the podium or whatever else in front of class, and, like, I know everything, I need to step down. I am done, because I have that mentality of, like, I know it all, or I've been there, done it, everything. You need to step down, because there's always something new that you can learn, you can grow from, and you can, pull from and use that, in your next class, and use and grow with. So I'm always looking at other people like yourself, everything else. And I pull, like when you were talking about your businesses when you were young, and even now, I definitely, like I said, like signing up for your PHU, I'm learning a lot from that. So, I mean, I'm learning a lot from you, and that's what keeps me growing and, being uncomfortable, because, like, if there's something I don't know, people don't like that. They don't like getting out of their comfort zone. I love that, because that means if I'm feeling uncomfortable, I'm growing and I'm learning. And that now I got to figure out, how can I put that into, my workplace? How can I make that work for me? How can I make that grow for me? And if it works, great. If it doesn't, shelf it. Come back to that later.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words, first of all. And second of all, I'm right there with you on that growth mentality. And when it comes to just learning and growth being a lifelong journey, the reason I asked you about the martial arts and everything else was because of the class that you mentioned. So it's amazing to hear that you have a nice base of theory, but also practical application and exercises that you're doing there. And like you said, that confidence comes from competence. When you know something,
Yes.
you have the confidence to actually execute it in real time in real world scenarios. And I think, again, the work that you do is not only in the direction of business and growing and everything else there, but it's really impactful work. You're really helping a lot of people. You're preventing disastrous situations. You're coming in very serious scenarios, and your depth of experience and knowledge really positions you well to do that. And I think if I'm one of these schools in your area or in the nation in general, or if I'm one of these companies or corporations that want my safety checked and want my processes and systems in place, I'm definitely going to be calling you. You're definitely the right person to come in and take a look at that with, again, the depth of knowledge and experience. So that's awesome. I love everything you've shared today. And I feel like, we could sit here and talk all day long, because as you know now, this entire realm of things is something I'm very passionate about and very much interested in. But I don't want to take up your entire day. So I want to ask you one final question. This is something that I ask every one of our guests, and usually how we wrap up our show here. Knowing everything that you know today, and the person that you are today, if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself just one piece of advice, what would that be?
One piece. Let's see here. One piece of advice. That would be learn as many skills as possible in your younger age, because it will pay off big dividends later on. I've got a buddy of mine. It's so funny. He'll call me up. He's like, man, I need help. I need you to do this for me. Go instruct. And he'll look at me. He's like, how do you remember everything we learned when we were back then? I was like, because that was my main focus, to learn, to grow, and just to absorb everything I learned from there, to be able to apply it to my job and not think twice about it. And so he's very good at business, but when it comes to the instructor, not so much. Whereas like I said, it's invest the time to learn as many skills as possible, master those skills as much as you can, become the subject matter expert in that. And then, again, continue to learn, and not only learn those skills, but get out there and teach them, because what makes you a better person to apply that stuff is being able to, if you can teach it and you can get it across someone and they learn it, that basically that instills, your confidence and competence in your abilities, but it also, it allows you to grow and see it at a different angle. And so learn the skills, but also try to teach the skills, instruct it. And then, have someone, once you teach them, have them get up there and, teach you, because if they can teach you, they're getting it, they're understanding. So yeah, I'd say that's one of them. I've got a lot of things if I could go back to my younger self, what to tell. So yeah, I'll go with that.
I can imagine. Yeah, I'm sure. But that's a great piece of advice. And, for all the younger people listening to this, or anybody who just wants to start taking charge of their lives, I think this is a really great piece of advice. So, Matt, it's been a pleasure. Where can everybody find you? Where can everybody get in contact with you and your team if they're looking to reach out and connect with you?
So they can reach me at www.specialopscontingent.group. That's my website. It's also got my contact information on there. You can reach me. I've got my email is SOCGroup725@gmail.com, or SOC Group 725. You can reach out. I'm pretty quick about getting back, because that's one of my pet peeves. If somebody, if I reach out to someone and they're not getting back to me it used to be, if I didn't hear from you in 15 minutes, I'm like, I know you got a phone stuck in your ear. Why aren't you answering? So I've given myself a little bit more leeway on that. So I will definitely get back and personally respond to everybody that reaches out on that. But yeah, the website's there. Check out the website, reach out to us. And like I said, if you don't see it on the website, believe me, we have the people and the resources to get, what you need and get it to you. So
that's awesome. And we'll be sure to include everything in the episode notes as well. And everybody can refer to you and your team for further help and connection, and just to tap into your depth of knowledge and experience. Matt, again, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to more future conversations.
Oh yeah, this is great. Like I said, you could reach out to me at any time. I'd love to sit down and talk to you more, just one-on-one. You're fantastic. Like I said, it's just I love what you're doing here. Keep it up. Keep it up. Good fight. So
appreciate you, Matt.